According to our course outline, we are supposed to look at introduction to um, introduction to Flutter. Okay. Our last meeting, we finished with or we, we concluded on the UX and UI design with um, emphasis on storytelling, storytelling, and then we talked about also the sketching and wireframing. Okay. Now there are other techniques that you can also learn. That's what we call the prototyping and then coming up with mockups. Okay, so um, you can learn those ones on your own, read about them, then sorry, and learn them. Find time to study them on. All right. So today we want to look at um, introduction to Flutter. Okay, we want to look at introduction to Flutter. I'm having a little challenge with my screen, so that's why I've shared the screen in this form. So please pardon me. Um, all right. So we will look at Flutter, the introduction to Flutter, and also that programming language, that programming language. Okay. So um, like we've established from our previous meeting, we said Flutter is a cross-platform um, mobile application development framework. Okay, and it provides it's provides or it's a framework, cross-platform framework where you can develop applications on your Android or on your iOS platform. Okay, so with the Android, it provides a native framework based on Java language, whereas when it comes to the iOS, it is based on the Objective-C or the Swift programming language. Okay, and you realize that we've already done Java, okay, from last sem, and also um, those of us who have done it at the HND level. Okay. So it's still within the same line. Okay, there may be a few tweaks here and there, but it's the same concepts and the same logic. All right, so Flutter is a simple high performance framework based on that programming language. It provides high performance by rendering user interface directly in the operating system's canvas rather than the native framework. Okay, so if we are talking about the native framework, we are talking about the Android framework and the iOS framework. Okay, so it's able to render the user interface directly on the OS's canvas, so the Android canvas or the iOS canvas. Okay. It also offers ready to use widgets to create modern applications. And then also the widgets can be optimized for mobile for the mobile environment and also for designing applications. These are, or the widgets is as simple as designing your HTML. Okay. All right, so Flutter application is simply um, a widget. Okay, it's simply a widget. So if you want to develop your application or your Flutter application, just see it as a widget. Now, this Flutter widgets also supports animation and gestures So the application logic is based on reactive programming. Now, the widgets are or may optionally have a state. Okay, and we'll talk about these states as we go along. So it may have a state, and by changing the state of the widget, the application will or your Flutter application will automatically compare the widget state, whether it's old or new, and then render that state um, based on the changes that is happening within your application. All right, so Flutter framework offers developers some features. What are some of these features? One, it has a modern and a reactive framework. It uses that programming language, which is easy to learn. It is faster to develop, or it's fast to develop. The interfaces are beautiful and fluid. Then there's a huge catalog of widgets that you can use in your application development. And then also it runs the same UI for the platforms on which you deploy them. So whether it's on Android or it's on your iOS platform, the UIs are the same. And then it also offer high performance in terms of running the application. So these are some terminologies that you should take note of. And uh, graphical or picture, okay, of some of these terminologies. We have the scaffold, we have the app bar, we have the text, we have the rich text, there's a safe area, there's a container, there are buttons, there are rows and columns. Okay. So in some of our basic or our first development or first examples we are going to look at, we are going to explore these um, key features or terminologies, okay, which are some of the basic things you should know when it comes to um, application development using Flutter. Okay, so we've looked at the UI already. We know what UI and UX is. So some advantages of using Flutter. It comes with a beautiful and customizable widget with high performance. Uh, it fulfills all the custom needs and requirements. It offers advantages like that programming language has a high or a large repository for software packages, which lets you extend the capabilities of your application. The developers also need to write just a single code base for both application or on both platforms. So it may be extended to other platform as well in the future. Flutter needs lesser testing because of its single code base and is efficient if we write automated test ones for both platform. It is sufficient. And some more advantages based on its simplicity, it makes uh, application development fast, it's more customizable, and also the extendability makes it more powerful. Now, developers have full control over the widgets and its layout, and then it offers developers uh, tools. It offers great developer tools with amazing reloads. Now, some disadvantages, since it's coded in that language, the developer needs to learn a new language, okay, which is that, which we are going to do today. Okay, but it's easy to learn though, because we are learning programming languages at the HND level. Okay, learning that follows the same logic and the same concept. Okay, the syntax might just differ a bit. Now, another disadvantage is that the modern framework tries to separate the logic and then the UI as much as possible. Okay, but in Flutter, the user interface and the logic is intermixed. Okay, it's intermixed. And then Flutter, or the developers usually have a hard time choosing the right developer tool, okay, because it's hugely populated. Okay, so those are some of the disadvantages when it comes to the use of Flutter. So now let's go into the installation process. So like I mentioned last week, you can run the application on your IntelliJ, or if you have your Android Studio. If you have your Android Studio or your IntelliJ, or you can equally do that with your MS or your VS Code. Okay. It's basically the same. It's going to give you the same outlook and all that. It's just up to you to decide which platform is best for you to develop in and acquaint yourself with it. Okay, so what I have here in the slide has to do with the Android Studio or the IntelliJ. Okay, I'll send you a video which would also help you when you want to set it up with your VS Code. Okay, but we'll be doing more of the work with the VS Code. All right. Okay, so to start your installation, it said you go to this Flutter URL. Okay, this URL for Windows if you're on Windows. If you're on iOS, or if you're on Mac, you also have there's also the Mac version that you can download. Okay, so you go to the site, download the Flutter SDK. I'm sure there should be a latest version now. So once you have it downloaded, it's a zip file. You unzip the file. You unzip the file, and then um, update the system path to include the Flutter bin directory. Okay, now to do that, you go into the environment variables to do that. Okay, these are things that um, I believe as a computer science student, you should know what the system path is. Okay, so you go into the, you just search if you're Windows, you just search for environment, okay, environment variable on your Windows, and that will give you a window. I'll give you this window. I believe you can all see the window.
Yeah.
Okay. So once you have this window, you go to the environment variables, and then you look for path. Okay. So the path is here under the system variable. Okay. And then you edit it. So what you do is you go into the location where your Flutter file is, where the file you downloaded, the Flutter SDK is. You go there and have your um, you have your bin, the bin directory, which will be inside the Flutter package. So let me just switch to that screen. I'm trying to work with one screen, so please bear me out. All right. So in my case, this is my Flutter SDK. Okay. So when I open it, I have the folder which has been unzipped, which is this one. This I've put here to create projects or to save projects that I'll create in here. But this is the Flutter SDK, which is unzipped. So mine is like about 3 gig. Okay. So once you open it, you see this folder, bin folder. Okay. And now you take the path to wherever this bin folder is, and you go and place this inside the uh, the system path. Okay, where I showed you the system variable path. Okay, you add it to it as um, you add it to it. You add it to it as a system path, so that your Flutter application can be linked to it, or your projects you create can be linked to it. And then once you are done, um, you open your command window. If you are using the VS Code, a terminal is there. You can open it and type Flutter Doctor. Okay, now this Flutter Doctor will check all the requirements of your check that all your Flutter requirements or development requirements are met. Okay, once that is met, then it means you are good to go to start with your development. Okay. Okay. So this is how running the Flutter Doctor will look like. It will show you a summary of your application, whether it's stable, the version you are using. So for instance, it shows here the Flutter version that is being used. If it's Android Studio, it shows. If it is VS Code, to show you the version. And if it's connected and all that, it shows you all of that. If there's any issue, there will be um, an instruction, okay, or a comment there, okay, for you to resolve that issue. It could be maybe with the version, or it could be that you have to update something. Okay, so you take note of that when you run the Flutter Doctor. All right. Okay, so if you are using Android Studio or IntelliJ, okay, once you install your application, okay, like I said, you use the Flutter Doctor to check that the requirements are satisfied. Okay, and then you have to start the Android emulator. Okay, so Android emulator is going to give you an interface. It's going to give you an interface for the emulator is just like a mobile interface or a web interface, which you see that is going to help you run your application. So anytime you add a widget or develop something and you run it, it's going to be displayed on the emulator. At the same time, too, you can use your real phone. Okay, you can connect it to your laptop or the device you are using, and also use the real phone as an emulator, okay, to run your application. Now, on your on your VS Code or your Android Studio or your IntelliJ, you need to install Flutter, okay, and you also need to install the DAT plugin. Okay, so whichever IDE you are using, you need to install the plugin, the Flutter plugin or the DAT and the DAT plugin. And then once you do that, you can create a new application and then start with the development. All right, so for IntelliJ or Android Studio, once you have your Flutter installed, you come in here or new projects, create a new project. You can just go to new Flutter projects. Then it gives you the interface to choose from, whether you want to begin a fresh project or you are using the Flutter plugin or a package. You make sure that it's selected, give the application a name, set the path for the SDK, set the location of your application as well, or of your project where it's supposed to be located. You make sure you have that also set. And then you give it a description, okay, which is optional. You can give it a description for your application. All right, so once the application is created, you have the project component, okay, which you see on your left-hand side of your screen. Okay, and I want us to know this various structure and their purpose. Okay, so this is Android, Flutter application structure. Okay, so we need to know the structure and what they do. So you can see that firstly, there's the project. So if you name the project name is Hello App, okay, that's the first directory we see here. Then in that directory, we have the Android folder, okay, which is going to hold the native framework for your Android. Then the iOS folder. Then we have the lib folder. We have the test folder. Then we have the git .git ignore .metadata .packages hello app.iml. Then papsec.lock papsec.yml. Then the readme. Okay, though all these are will be inside your application folder anytime you create an application. Okay, then we have another um, directory here, which is the external libraries, in which you have the Dart package, the Dart SDK, and the Flutter for Android. Okay, these are all directories that helps in your development. All right, so let's look at the various directories inside or folders or files inside your project folder and what they do. Okay, so we have the Android folder or Android directory, which uh, you see there the auto-generated source code to create the Android application. Like we said, it's cross-platform. Okay, so in there you see source code to create your Android application. Then we have the iOS directory as well, where you have auto-generated source code to create iOS application. Then we have the lib. Now the lib is the main folder containing your that code. Okay, that's where you are going to write your that code. So that's the lib folder, uh, as you can see over here. Okay, so that's the lib folder. That's where you have your main that's code. Then there is the uh, lib.main. So this is that file that has been created in the lib directory, okay, which is the entry point of your Flutter application. That's where you are going to create your project. Then we have the test folder, which is used to test the application. And within that folder, we have the widget underscore test dot that, which is a sample code which is auto-generated here as well. So you can see that here. And then we have the git.ignore. Okay, so this is the version control file. And we are going to look at how we can also set that up. Okay, so that we can, whilst you are working in groups, we can contribute, okay, to other people's work. Or you are working in group, you can use that platform to contribute to the work that you are doing as a group remotely. Then we have the metadata, which is auto-generated by the Flutter tools. Then we have the packages auto-generated to track the Flutter packages. Then we have the IML, which is the project file used which is the project file used by the Android Studio. And then we also have the papsec.yml. Now this is used to it's used by the pub. Okay, that's the Flutter package manager. Okay, and we are going to use this aspect a lot, especially when it comes to adding what we call assets to your application. And we'll talk about that as we go on, adding your assets to your applications. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
Yes, sir.
all right.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're on the the pubsec.y AML. Like I said, with this part, we'll be coming up with assets. Assets are basically the images and the icons and the other resources that you'll be using in your project. Okay, so we'll be using the pubsec.yml to manage those resources. Then we have the pubsec.log, which is also generated by the Flutter package manager, and then the README, which is written in Markdown format. So for every Flutter application you create, you see this application structure. Okay, you see it there. So for each of them, you should know how they work. Okay, just like we did last semester with the IntelliJ, or we created our JavaFX project. Okay, the project folder had some files in there. Okay, so for instance, the final end of SEM project you did, when I asked for the code, okay, that was what I was looking out for, to see your interface, to see the code that you wrote, and so on. Okay. All right, so there's some code here, but I'll not go into it. We'll look at that next week when we meet face to face. Okay, so I'll switch to the Dart slide so that we can look at the Dart programming language and see how, whether it's similar to, or how similar it is to other programming languages we know of. All right. So that programming language, okay, or that programming. Okay. Now that is an open source general purpose programming language. It's originally developed by Google. Okay, so Google have contributed to a lot of these mobile application developments, platforms and frameworks, and sometimes even the languages. Okay, so I remember some time back when mobile applications started, okay, we used to download the SDK, and then uh, either you are using IntelliJ or you are using your Eclipse or NetBeans platform. You use those platforms um, to actually load the you use those platforms to load your um, to load your SDK, okay, so that you can actually have the platform to develop your Android application. Okay, then around 2012, 2013, they introduced the Android Studio, which was uh, a platform for um, downloading, or a platform for developing your Android application. Okay. Over the years, Android Studio has been there. These other platforms like NetBeans and Eclipse and uh, what's it called, IntelliJ, are also there, and now VS Code as well. Okay. So it was originally developed by Google. Then that is an object-oriented language, okay, with a C style syntax. Okay, the C style syntax I believe we've all done C++. Okay, and even with the Java that we've done, it flows within the same syntax. Okay, so we said it's object oriented because it supports the concepts like interfacing classes and objects. Uh, Unlike other programming language that does not support arrays. Okay, it works with what we call lists. Okay, lists. So he said list or collection. So that collection can be used to replicate data structures such as array, generic, and also optional typing. Okay, so they use collection to handle lists. All right, so a simple or a typical DAT program would look like this. Okay, where you have your void main, like the way we write in our Java, uh, public static void main. Okay, so our main method over here, and then we have the statement in there. So it uses the print statement to output a text. It uses the print statement to output a text. Okay. Now, uh, in terms of variables, that also has a unique way of declaring variables. Okay, so it uses the keyword var. Okay, uses the keyword var to declare a variable. So var name equals that. Okay, so it assigns the string that to the variable name. Okay. Now, when it comes to still on the variable declaration, or let me say constant declaration, it uses the final and the const keyword to declare constant. Okay, so the final keyword, so final A is 12, and then const pi. Okay, pi is a constant value, 3.14. Okay, and then you can use the print keyword to just output the value of those variables. So in terms of data types, we have the numbers data type. Okay, so that uh, uh, numbers in that are represented with numeric literals like integer and then doubles. Then when it comes to string, we know strings to be sequence of characters, and they are specified in either a single quote or a double quote. Okay, as you can see from the previous slide. So this is a double quote, which is a string. This is a single quote, which is also a string. Then we have Boolean, which is used to represent true or false. Then we have lists and maps, which are used to represent a collection of objects. Okay, we've also mentioned that in the previous slide. So in terms of lists, how does it work? Now, this is how a list is um, this is how you introduce a list in that or using that programming language. Okay, so a list, it could be a name of individuals in the class, okay, or a list of ages. Now, it works this way because the data, when you use a list, the data should be of the same type. Okay, so if it is numbers, it's numbers throughout. Okay. However, with the mapping, the data can be of different type, but they are related. So it could be something regarding maybe an employee. Okay. If it's an employee, you can map it by taking the employee's ID, the employee's name, okay, the ID, the name, okay, in that form. So when you specify the ID, you know that it's a numeric value. When you specify the name, you know that it's what? A string. Okay. So in this context, we use mapping to handle it. But when it comes to data of the same type, then we use the lists to handle it. So you can write it this way as a list in this form. It is known as mapping. Now, then there's also dynamic. That is to say that if variable is not defined, okay, if the variable type is not defined, then this type is said to be dynamic. How does a dynamic work? Mm. So when the type of the variable is not given, so whether it's an integer or it's a double or it's a string or so on, when you don't specify it, you can use what dynamic to do that, and that will automatically um, pick the type based on the the data type of your value. Okay? To pick it based on the data type of your value. All right. So let's look at decision making and loops. Okay, this is just a quick one. When it comes to the operators, okay, they are the same operators we know of, the backslash, forward slash, the greater than or less than, and so on. They are still the same when it comes to that programming. Now, in terms of decision making basically has to do with conditional statements or what we call the branching statements. Okay, so that uses the if else, the if and the if else statements, and also the switch case. Okay? It supports the use of these statements. And then when it comes to the loops, it supports the use of the for loop. Then there's a for in. So the for in will specify the range. Okay, if you are working within a range, you are looping within the range, you use the for in to do that. Then we have the while loop and also the do while loop. Okay, these are things, like I said, you already know from previous studying of previous uh, programming languages. Okay, so how do we implement it? Just like we do in C++ and Java, you use your for loop. So var, like we said, var is used for declaring variable. So var I equals 1, I less than or equal to. So the condition is here, less than or equal to 10. Then I plus plus, which is the updation or the increment. And then over here is implementing the if statement. So if, then you specify the condition. If I mod 2, okay, that's I mod 2 will give you a remainder of 0. If this is true for I, then you print out I. Okay, so that is how decision making and loops are implemented in that programming language. Then we have functions or methods or behaviors or operations or procedures. Function. Now, function is a group of statements that together perform a specific task. And so in that programming language, if you want to write a function, you specify, or this is the main function. It is the main function, void main. Now, if you want to introduce a user-defined function, so this is a user-defined function, user-defined. Now, this function is supposed to add two numbers. Okay. So with this function, We start with the void type. Now we know from previous lectures that anytime you use the voice, it doesn't give you any return value. Okay. And then we introduce the function name add, then int a plus int b. So the parameters or the arguments you want to push into the function for your operation. And then we introduce C, where we are going to is the location where your A and B, the value of A plus B will be stored. Okay, we do A plus B, and then we print C. A plus B equals to C, and then we print C. Okay. Then after doing this, we come and call this user-defined function inside the main function. We perform what is called a function call. So you can come and call your function in here and assign the actual parameters. Okay, so the actual parameter of A is 3, and the actual parameter or argument of B is 4. Okay, so once you do that, it adds these two numbers and gives you your output C equals 7. Okay, so that's how functions work in that. Then we come to object-oriented programming concepts in that programming. Okay, now that's it's a programming language that supports object-oriented programming features like classes, objects, interface, inheritance, polymorphism, and so on. Okay, we know a class to be a blueprint for creating objects, and an object is a collection or is made up of um, attributes and behaviors. Okay, now in defining your class, you can use the following. You have the fields, you have the getters, the setters, the constructors, and then we have function. The constructors, getters, and setters are special functions. Okay? The fields are the variables that you are going to declare, and or the attributes to your class. All right, so an example is here. So we have a class and we have the function and then the main function. So this is a class employee is taking a field or an attribute string name. Then we introduce the getter to get the name. We introduce the setter here. Okay, just like we've seen in Java in previous years. Okay. Then we have a function which has also been created in the class. So this is the result function, which is supposed to print out the name that is being entered from here, or that is declared here. Then we have the void main. So void main, which is the main function. Okay, the main function, we are going to create an object of the employee class. So if we create an object or employee class, basically saying that, okay, we are taking a scenario or an instance of one employee, and then we'll use that to perform the operation. So we create the object of the class employee emp equals new employee, employee.name equals employee1. Okay, so the name of the employee, then employee.result. So this employee.result will call this void result function and then print out the name. All right. So basically, the Android or the Flutter and then the Dart programming language. The Dart programming language follows the main basic syntax and the basic knowledge we've learned from programming languages like C++ and Java in previous years. Okay, so there isn't any new thing. Okay, you just need to know how to write some of these constructs. For instance, the looping, the if-else statements, the uh, classes, how to perform operations, given some expressions, and so on. Okay. Any question? Any question? Any questions so far? Any question?
No, no questions. It's clear. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, Ananias, your hand is up.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
Please, concerning the list and the maps, can we equate it to arrays in other programming languages like the C++ and Java?
Yes, so they follow the same concepts. If you notice the one of the slide, we said it doesn't work directly with arrays, but they use what we call collection. And this collection is made up of the lists and the maps. Okay, so the list works more like an array. The list works like an array. I think Python also does the same. Okay, in Python, you use lists, okay, to handle data of the same type, just like an array would work. Okay, but the mapping works more like in C++, we call it a structure. Okay, works like a structure or a class where you are handling data of different types. Okay, but the list is used to handle data of the same type. Any other?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other question? Okay. So in the absence of any question, we'll end the lecture here.